What I have here is a SCX24 rear axle housing. The way this works is the bearing goes in here, the bearing goes in on the other side. This pinion gear, spur gear rather, goes in the middle, and the other bearing goes in over there. Okay? Then the axles go in. Alright? And the axles fit on the bearings like so. Really small, so I don't know how well you're gonna see it. And then the chamfered end of the axle shaft goes into the differential gear, and that's how this axle is driven, with the worm gear from the drive shaft. So it's all metal gears, all bearings inside of a stock factory SCX24 housing. I need a trailer axle this size because I want to use SCX24 stock wheels and tires for a trailer. So I took some measurements, measured the bearings. I know the width that I need the axle to be. So now I have some parts that I printed, and I'm about to see if this idea is going to work. So if my measurements were right, this bearing should fit right in here, kind of like that. Ain't that pretty? Then the axle will go in to the housing, and it's going to set right about there, but you can see that it would probably go all the way through. We don't want that to happen, so we have an issue to solve with that. But let's see if the other bearing is going to fit, just like it should. Okay, so there's one end of an SCX24 scale trailer axle. Let's put another. It's just going to be a non-driven straight trailer axle. Nobody makes this in 24 scale, so I know that that bearing will go in there because the other one did, and it's modeled after the same part. So now I'll put the axle in, get it centered. There it is, sticking out through the bearing. And now I'll put another bearing on the outside. Now, these two pieces are not the entire solution to the problem. The rest of the problem is holding these together strong enough with something in between to keep the axles from being pushed through. That's where this tube comes in. This tube is only hollow part way, and it's tapered. Notice the taper on this? It's tapered to fit that, so this will only go in so far, and now the axle won't push in because it bottoms out on the back, on the inside. So same thing on this side. This one pushes in, and once they're pushed in all the way, the axle has a little bit of wiggle room, but it can't go in any further than that. Now, on the stock housing, they use a couple of little bitty screws in the end of the housing to retain the bearings. So I, being the wise, fine copycat that I am, decided that I could use the same process. So I made little holes that I will thread the stock SCX24 screws into, and hopefully I made the holes big enough. And come on, baby, thread in there. It's the moment of truth here for me. Be nice. Guess I'm gonna have to hold on to it a little better. But I believe that this will thread in there all the way. I think I made the holes deep enough. I hope so. We'll know in just a minute. Just snug them down. Don't want to strip them. That overlaps the edge of the bearing. Now it can't come out, right? So that's going to retain that axle in the housing the exact same way that it does on the stock housing. Let's put one in the other side. Get a screw put in it. Make sure I pick the short screws here. And see if we can get one to start on this side. I think I would voluntarily make this screw hole just a wee bit bigger than I did for this. So there's the assembly. The axle is spinning. It's got no lateral movement, and it's mounted on the bearings, and the bearings are held in place. This end inside is not a bottomless pit. It's actually shaped just like that to allow the end of the axle to fit in there and retain the bearing in place. And this gets glued in, and we have a very, very nice design, and that's the cradle that it'll get glued to. So the cradle will get trimmed, it'll get glued to the frame, the axle will sit in the cradle, centered on the frame, and we have a 24 scale axle, trailer axle, that will take the 24 scale pins and hexes for SCX24 scale wheels.